Welcome back to Professor Han's pattern class. We're continuing our work on drafting facings. In part 1, we drafted the front facing. In this video, we'll draft the back facing and complete the entire set of facings. Let's get started. Go ahead and grab a 13 by 13 inch size of dot paper. As always, we'll begin by drawing a vertical guideline. This will be our center back. Now, take your back basic block with the shoulder dart. Our facing width will be about 2 inches, so as long as you have around 2.5 inches below the armhole at the side seam included within your 13 by 13 dot paper, you're good to go. Align the center back line of the basic block with the vertical guideline you just drew. The important thing here is to make sure you include about 2.5 inches below the armhole on your paper. So this time, just focus on aligning the guideline with the center back line of the block. Don't worry about matching the neck point to a dot. Now, let's trace the outline of the basic block, including all necessary markings and information. Before drafting anything else, again, use a ruler to define the sharp corners. Double-check the size of the front facing before you begin drafting the back facing. First, mark a point 2 inches away from the side neck point. From that mark, draw a perpendicular guideline. Now, just like we did on the front facing, we're going to trim 1/16 of an inch at the shoulder. So go to the guideline you just drew and mark a point 1/16 of an inch lower from the shoulder down toward the bodice. Next, draw a line connecting that lowered new point to the side neck point. And remember, we won't change the neckline. Now, mark a point 2 inches down from the center back neck point and draw a perpendicular guideline. Next, use your French curve ruler to find the section that best matches the neckline curve. Once you find a good angle, begin drafting your curve line. Keep in mind there's no fixed length for the guideline, so you'll need to decide the best spot where your curve should merge into it. After you've drafted the shape, take a step back and evaluate the curve. Make any adjustments you need until you're happy with how it looks. After marking 2 inches for the back armhole facing just like we did for the front, I want to point something out. If you're making a garment with a shoulder dart, like we did with the basic block mock-up, this 2-inch facing works fine. The dart excess will be pressed toward the center, and there's enough space, so it doesn't overlap with the facing. But if you're using a princess line pattern, there's a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the shoulder. In that case, the facing and the seam allowance will overlap in this area. To avoid this issue, it's a good idea to mark first where the seam allowance will be, usually 1/2 inch for us. Once that's marked, take another look at the area and decide how much space is actually available for your facing. This way, you can adjust the facing width to prevent any overlap and bulk. Now, let's imagine we're making this facing for a princess line pattern. In that case, 1 3/4 inches turns out to be an ideal width for the armhole facing. It gives enough room between the facing and the princess line seam allowance, so they don't overlap, and that helps avoid bulk inside the garment. Okay, now that we've decided on the proper facing width, go ahead and draw a perpendicular guideline. Next, trim 1/16 of an inch at the shoulder, and then draw a line from that trimmed point to the shoulder tip. Always remember before anything else. Redefine the corner first. Then, mark 2 inches down from the armhole and draw a perpendicular guideline. Now, take your French curve ruler and find the part that best matches the shape of the armhole curve. Move the ruler in a diagonal direction, like I'm showing you here, and draw the line lightly. You'll need to go over the line several times, making small adjustments as you go. Keep refining the curve until you're happy with the final shape. Okay, do you remember? When we first drafted the front armhole facing, we made it 2 inches wide, but later we adjusted it to 1 3/4 inches to avoid overlapping with the seam allowance. Now that we've confirmed we're working on a princess line garment, it's time to go back and update the front armhole facing to match the back so both are 1 3/4 inches. As we make that adjustment, we'll also go through the walkthrough process to check how the facing lines up and make sure everything flows smoothly. To do this step, first fold the shoulder line on one of your facing pieces. Then, match it to the shoulder on the other piece. Make sure the shoulder tip points line up exactly. After that, you can redraw or adjust the facing shape if needed. Most importantly, double check that you're folding the correct shoulder line. That's the key to getting an accurate match. At this point, I'm going to stick with the back-facing size because of the seam allowance issue. So, I'll redraft the front-facing shape based on the width of the back-facing. Of course, as I redefine the front-facing shape like I'm doing here, I'll adjust the entire facing line for both the front and back at the same time. Now, I can adjust the rest of the shape line. Okay, now let's trim 1/8 of an inch from the side. Mark a point 1/8 of an inch away from the perpendicular guideline we drew very earlier, then draw a line from that point to the armhole. Remember, it's important that the perpendicular guideline from the side is long enough to work with this process. Okay, now it's time to walk through the side seam. This is important. You must match the newly defined side seams. Don't skip this step or it'll mess up your fit. Now we need to complete the front armhole facings shape line. We've already walked through the top and bottom sections, so let's take a look at the full shape and refine it as a whole. Alright, let's stop here for a second and check the shoulder drop. We originally lowered this point by 1/16 of an inch, right? But since we changed the size of the facing, we need to make sure that drop is still accurate. So I'm going to measure from the original shoulder line. Okay, this still shows a 1/16 of an inch drop perfect. If yours is less than that, go ahead and adjust it now. Make sure it's exactly 1/16 of an inch, so everything lines up properly later. Before you detach these two pieces, hold on. Don't forget to add a notch at the center. Just mark that middle point now so it stays aligned later. Okay, now it's time to walk through the neck facing. First, fold the correct shoulder line. Make sure you've got the right one, this is really important. Then, match both sides exactly at the shoulder seam. Line them up carefully so we can check the shape and make any adjustments if needed. So, when you draft a facing, remember, you can't change the neckline or armhole line at that stage. In this video, we're creating a facing based on either the basic block mock-up or the princess line pattern we made in class. That means the neckline and armhole I traced are exactly the same as the ones on the self-fabric surface piece. Now let's say in the future, you're working on a facing for a specific design, and while you're walking through the process, you notice the neckline shape doesn't look smooth. Then you want to fix it, right? Stop there. You can't just change the facing's neckline at that moment. What you need to do is go back to the original self-fabric pattern, adjust the neckline there first, and then come back to the facing. Next, you trace back that new, corrected neckline onto the facing pattern. Why? Because the facing's neckline is not new, it's actually borrowed directly from the self-fabric pattern. Alright, then let's walk through the front and back neck facings and finalize the shape. Notches are really important in pattern making and sewing because they act as guides during construction. They help align pieces accurately when you sew them together, ensuring the garment fits correctly and the seams match up. But beyond that, notches can also indicate things like dart placement, pleats, or where to start or stop stitching. They can show you which side is the front or back, or even help with layering order when there are multiple components involved. So adding notches isn't just helpful. It's essential for keeping the sewing process smooth and accurate. Now it's time to mark all the key details. Draw the grain line. Use the same direction as the original bodice. Since we aligned the center with the guideline earlier, you can use that center dot to indicate the grain line direction for the facing. Before wrapping up, I want to make sure you clearly understand which line is the final one. Remember, we trimmed a bit from the middle of the shoulder and side seam, so be sure you're working with the updated corrected lines.